Jonathan Paul Estes was a 35-year-old father of two from Bogue Chitto, Mississippi. He worked in construction and was active in his church. On June 2, 2018, Jonathan was at home and spoke to his best friend. Jonathan then said he was going outside to see why the police were going up and down his road. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. Stealing of other people's information has never been easier in human history. Only 30 years ago, if you wanted to steal someone's identity, you had to maybe pickpocket a person on the subway, or somehow smooth talk your way around a county clerk to get your hands on someone else's birth certificate, or wait by a mailbox for a postal person to deliver. Really, think about it. 30 years ago. That's it. Today, well, things have changed. Somebody can get your entire credit history, driving history, social security number, everything, without even leaving their own country. And before you know it, you're seeing charges for vacations, and jewelry, and porn on your accounts. And your credit rating has gone into the crapper. It's happening every day. Well, in the case of Jonathan Estes, we're going to be talking about the good side of getting information you're not supposed to have, through both straightforward and creative means. And I think you'll realize this disappearance investigation wouldn't even be close to where it is without a family member hacking for facts. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Good's website, charlieproject.org. Jonathan Estes was a good father. He was close with both of his children, taking his daughter on a trip to Washington, D.C., and often going fishing with his son. However, his work often took him not just out of town, but out of the state of Mississippi. Yet he called them often from the road. But his marriage suffered, and in April 2018, his wife Cindy requested a divorce. This started a month and a half of conflict between the two, with her accusing Jonathan of rape, and he accusing Cindy of trying to run him over with her vehicle on May 31st of 2018. There was also the issue of their son Bryce sending Jonathan pictures from Cindy's phone, proving that she had been having affairs with men and couples while Jonathan was out of town. So on June 2nd, 2018, Jonathan was allegedly at home, although no one saw him. He had a phone conversation with the local police concerning the recent incidents involving himself and Cindy. His plan was to go to their headquarters later that day to give his side of the story. Jonathan then spoke to his friend Kevin, also on the phone, the topic again being the rape accusation Cindy made against Jonathan. At some point, while on the phone with Kevin, Jonathan noticed a police vehicle going up and down his road. He said he was going to go outside to see what was going on. Jonathan hung up his phone. He was never seen again. This is a very new case, and developments continue as we speak. For example, Cindy is about to go on trial for the alleged theft of a piece of equipment that was Jonathan's. However, these main questions have popped up over the last year. Number 1. How did Jonathan's truck go missing for several days when it seems to have sat on Cindy's father's property the entire time until it was discovered? Number 2. What role, if any, do X-rated pictures of Cindy with other men play in Jonathan's disappearance? And number 3. Why exactly were police driving up and down Jonathan's road on June 2nd, 2018? And who were those officers? Jonathan's family believes foul play is involved in his disappearance. However, there are still people in law enforcement who believe Jonathan ran off due to the rape charges Cindy filed against him. The guest for this episode is Jonathan's sister, Melissa Estes. Unfound news. By my count, there are now 3 meetups planned in Texas coming up in July. One is in Amarillo on July 24th, one in Dallas on July 14th, and another in Houston which still does not have a date. If you are interested in attending any of them, please join the Unfound podcast discussion group to find out more details. Or you can email me at unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Next, Volume 6 of Season 1 is almost done. It actually would have been done by now, but due to my father being here for 2 weeks, that kind of slowed down my work. I'd like to thank Dr. Eric Grabowski for writing the foreword for the final book of Season 1. And finally, looks like July 15th, I'll be doing an interview for the Missing Persons documentary I've been telling you all about for the last few months. I think they're going to film it right here in my apartment. I'm very excited about it, and I'll let you know how it goes. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound supports accounts on Podomatic, iTunes, Stitcher, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. On Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, please join us on YouTube for the Unfound live show. Contribute to Unfound at patreon.com/Unfound podcast. This week I need to thank Crystal. You can also contribute at PayPal, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. That is also the email address. Merchandise. The books at Amazon.com in both ebook and print form. Do not forget the reviews, people. Shirts at myshopify.com. Cards at makeplayingcards.com. And please mention Unfound at all true crime websites and forums. Thank you. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the sister of Jonathan Estes, Melissa Estes. Melissa, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you.
Let's start here talking about your brother, Jonathan. Older brother or younger brother?
He is the baby brother.
He is. 5 of us. Wow, okay. And he was the youngest of the 5, and where do you fall in there?
I am second to the oldest.
Second to the oldest. So how many years older are you than Jonathan?
I am 13, almost 14 years older.
Wow. Okay. Well, that had been very interesting. So, like, when you were 20, he was like 6 or 7. Was it more of a brother-sister relationship eventually, or was it maybe sometimes maybe a little like mother and son? How would you portray a relationship with your brother Jonathan?
Well, he was the quintessential little brother. I mean, he wanted to tag along everywhere, but John is only 4 years older than my oldest child, so he kind of grew up at my house playing with my kids.
Uh-huh. And what was that like for you? That's a very unique situation. What was that like?
Yeah, he was there when all my kids were born. Like even my youngest, he was so excited he couldn't wait, you know.
Uh-huh.
So we were close, you know, John. We've always been close. I've been the one that he talked to when he needed somebody to talk to because, you know, I was his big sister, you know, whether he listened or not.
Huh. Okay. And so there's you two, and you have any other brothers or other sisters, the other 3?
Yes, we have an older sister, Donna, and then I have a sister younger than me, Jenny, and then we had a brother, Alan, and then it was John.
Okay, 3 girls. So 3 girls to start and then 2 boys to finish.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So 13, 14 years older. I know I kind of in my family have a little bit of a situation. I have brothers and a sister that are quite a bit older than me, like 17 to 20 years older. So I know what that's like at least a little bit. So Jonathan, you saw him grow up. What was he into? Sports, hunting, fishing? What would you say that he was into, his interests?
As a little kid, he did sports. John was hunting, anything outdoors, riding motorcycles, 4-wheelers, camping, hiking, skiing, snowboarding. That was John. Anything with adventure.
Okay, anything with adventure. Okay. And he went to high school? Did he go to high school or college or anything?
No, he didn't go to college. He was a worker. He got out of high school. I say he went to college for a little bit over in Montana, but that wasn't really for him. He wanted to be working every day, so he started working in construction, and then he got into concrete.
Okay. Okay.
Stayed in concrete pretty much. He did a lot on his own when he wasn't working for work through a company. He would be working doing concrete for friends and people back home.
Okay. And some of that work sometimes took him out of town. That's going to be part of this, but sometimes his work took him out of town, out of Mississippi.
Correct.
Okay. How do you like that work?
He liked it. He was proud of the work that he did. He didn't like being away from his kids. A lot of the times, he'd bring his kids to job sites with him. He'd bring the whole family
Huh.
with him. They homeschooled the kids some so that they could travel with him on jobs.
That's interesting. Well, that sounds pretty good. That sounds pretty good. You sounds like a good dad. That's good to hear. Um, and of course, he was in his 30s when he went missing. So at the time that he went missing, he had been in that industry for quite a while.
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right. Have to ask this in any interview that I do, just so we can put these things on the table. And I say this every time. This is not to dwell on these things or anything, but we have to talk about it. To your knowledge, in knowing your younger brother like you did, any drug issues, law issues, anything like that going on in his life at the time of his disappearance?
No, not at the time of his disappearance. I mean, when he was a teenager, he was like most teenage kids. He had gotten in a little trouble for some pot.
Mm-hmm.
I believe he had a DUI in his early 20s, you know, being young and dumb, but
Mm-hmm.
we all grow up. He grew up, had kids, and he had no issues with the law or drugs.
Okay.
He worked and gave to his kids. That's what
All
his
right.
life was.
Okay. And I know that we'll get into shortly before he disappeared, he actually took one of his children on a trip for his church or something like that, right? That's something that.
Correct.
Okay, and we'll talk about that a little bit here before this interview is over. All right, now let's just in general talk about his wife, Cindy. Just we're of course going to be talking about her a lot, as the listeners will probably predict, but let's just talk about the generalities, how they met, when they got married, how long they married, how many kids, things like that. So, if you can remember, or if you know, how did Cindy and Jonathan meet?
Uh, my parents we grew up in Mississippi and in the Pacific Northwest, our lives. My dad was a missionary, so we started churches up north in the Pacific Northwest. So John had been living in Idaho with my parents, and I lived down here, and he had moved down here for a little bit and was staying with me, and my parents moved from Idaho down to Bogue Chitto, and my dad had a church down there, and John started going down to my parents, and through one of the guys at the church, I don't remember his name, maybe his name was Jason, I believe, introduced John and Cindy. Anyways, and that's how he met Cindy, was through one of the guys at the church he was hanging out with.
Okay. And was it a long romance? Did they get married quickly, as you remember, or did it take some time? And how do you remember it?
No, it was fairly quickly.
Fairly quickly. And okay, and at the time, not now, but at the time, whenever that was, what'd you think of her?
I didn't really know her.
Okay.
So, I mean, it was just odd, for John to have got married so quickly because I didn't know. I hadn't met her before they got married until, like,
Oh, really?
planning the wedding, and we went down there. My girls, both my younger two girls were in their wedding, but it was just odd because I didn't know anybody in her family. I still don't know anybody in her family.
Okay. So you did not meet her until virtually the time that Jonathan and Cindy got married.
Pretty much.
Okay. Um, let's do it this way. Of those other people who did get to know her, and what did they think of her? Were she and Jonathan a good match?
Mm,
Can you remember anybody talking at the time? Once again, back whenever this was, however long, I'm going to guess maybe this was mid 2000s, something like that, maybe.
I mean, I'm not going to say that. I mean, they were happy at first,
Mm-hmm.
but I believe that, that there's always been problems or issues.
Okay. All right. And would you say that once they did get married, you were at their wedding, they get married, and they had at least two kids that I know of, a son and a daughter. Did you get to see them a lot more after they were married?
I seen John and Bryce and Amy Grace a lot. I mean, John would
Mm.
come up to my parents when my parents lived up here, or the kids would come up to my parents, but Cindy didn't always come with them.
Okay.
Or when my daughter would be playing soccer, we would stay down at my brother's or by my brother's a lot, and we would meet up. But Cindy didn't always come with him; just the kids would come.
Okay. So you would say I'm gonna maybe just to what I'm hearing is that
I mean,
maybe
even
you
to the point
please.
that my brother, like, I have friends that have a cabin up here on a lake called Pickwick, and my brother, when his buddy from Idaho had came down and visit him and his friend come up to the cabin and stayed like a week up at the cabin, but she didn't come with them. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, she didn't always go places with him.
Okay. So it just doesn't sound to me like you and Cindy were very close. You didn't get to know her very. Okay. You were not.
I mean, if not close at all, if she would come with John, they would stay at my house, you
Mm.
know.
Okay.
But we didn't like no, there
Okay.
wasn't a close relationship.
Okay. You were not you're not like the sister-in-law who suddenly became the Jonathan wife's best friend, as sometimes
No,
happens
no, we weren't best
in
friends.
or anything like that. Okay. All right. And how would you explain what you saw regarding their relationship, and how long were they married, if just roughly at the time of Jonathan's disappearance last year, 2018?
I'm gonna say 13, 14 years, somewhere in there. They were married.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure, but somewhere in there, 13, 14 years.
Okay. How would you portray their marriage over that time? Was it up and down? Was it rough? Uh,
It was up and down. It was toxic.
okay.
He would talk to me about being unhappy and but he would say he loved her and he wanted to work it out for the kids. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he was torn, but then towards the end he was ready. He had had enough. He was ready to the kids knew, I mean, they could see what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
It was Tom. He knew it was Tom and he was ready.
Okay. All right, well, let's move up. So they got married maybe 13, 14 years before he disappeared. Let's just say 2004. So, and they have two children, Bryce, and what is the daughter's name? She is older, I know.
Amy Grace.
Okay. And let's move up to the year before, so 2017. Just to set this up, of course, was John doing a lot of work out of Mississippi at the time or out of the area? So she was home with the kids alone a lot and he's out on the road. Is that how it was in 2017?
Yes.
Okay. And was it during this time that John was telling you that things were rough and you said they had a rough relationship, a toxic relationship? Did he say some of those things once again between you and him in 2017?
Yeah, he wasn't happy.
Mm-hmm.
They were arguing a lot. They were arguing a lot.
Okay. About what? If he, I don't want you to guess. I just want you to tell the listeners what he told you.
Kids. Um, he says she's greedy, money.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we're gonna talk a little bit about that. But did you get the feeling in 2017 that in 2018, as it happened, that they were going to be headed for a divorce? Did you get that feeling in
Yes,
2007? You did.
yes.
Okay. All right. When did you first hear that they were getting a divorce? How did you find that out? Did he tell you directly, or did you hear from one of your other family members? And when did you hear that last year?
I knew. Well, I knew they were having issues, and were talking about splitting up, before they actually split up. But they had split up, and it was probably a couple of weeks they had been split up before I found out, and I found out from my parents.
Okay. And do you remember when that was last year? We have to remind the listeners, it's a relatively very new, at least in the Unfound world, it's a relatively new disappearance from June of 2018. Would you say that you heard about that in March of 2018, April? How do you remember it?
No, I didn't find out that him and Cindy had like split up until probably the first part of May, right
Wow.
before him and Amy was going on their trip.
Okay. All right. And Um, did you at the time when you found out from your parents, did they tell you why? Because we know we're going to talk about the specifics that happened, but did your parents pass along to you at the time in early May of 2018 why it was happening?
I mean, I knew that John and her have been having problems,
Mm-hmm.
but and I want to say they had split up maybe once in 2017. I'm not positive because he was out of town so
Right.
much working and would only come home on weekends. But I believe for a while in 2017 he may have stayed in the camper, like my parents have the bumper pool RV camper that John had, and I believe he may have stayed in it for like a couple weekends when he had come home or something when they were having issues. Not
Okay.
positive, but I believe that had happened. So I mean, we knew they were having issues. So I wasn't surprised when my parents had said that they were split up and John had got his own house.
Okay. And who made this divorce happen first? Was it her that, let's just put it in general terms, was it she who went to a divorce lawyer first, or was it Jonathan who went to a divorce lawyer first?
If she went to one first, I know nothing about it. I know John had went to a divorce attorney and was seeing one and had divorce papers drawn up because I found a copy of them. So I
Okay.
know John had seen one, and he had told my parents that he had talked to the divorce attorney, and she had told him that he needed to sit down with Cindy and go over everything and them come to an agreement, because if they could come to an agreement, it would be better.
Right.
That's what he was going to do.
Okay. All right. And the listeners should just realize that maybe some of the things we're going to be talking about, Melissa did not find out until after they happened. Okay. Just keep that in mind as we progress here. And this is a very complicated disappearance. So we just have to do these things the best we can to explain it. And also, but also then get in Melissa's mind and how she remembers it at the same time. Now, you did not find out about this until the beginning of May, but Jonathan did move out of the house in April of 2018, of course, before you even found out. What did you hear about him moving out and how that happened?
I heard that the weekend he had come home the weekend of like April, a weekend in April, somewhere around the 22nd or 23rd of April, somewhere in there he had come home.
Okay.
And they had been over at his best friend Kevin, hanging out, him and Cindy and the kids, with Kevin and Bridget and their kids. And Cindy left early and went home, and then John and the kids went home, and he was supposed to be leaving to go out of town the next morning. So he told Kevin that that Cindy woke him up and was telling him, "Get up, I want a divorce, it's over," blah, just going off on him. And he was like telling her, "Why are you doing this? You know I got to leave right now." And she just told him that's it. She wanted a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
He had to leave. I mean, that's his job. That's how he supported his family.
Okay.
He knew he had to leave, too.
All right.
And so he was gone back to Texas to work, and he didn't get to come home for a couple weeks.
Okay. So it sounds like to me, though, that if she woke him up and demanding a divorce, it sounds like she was the one that instigated it. Or how would you, how do you
Yeah,
interpret
she's
that?
the one that told him that she wanted a divorce and started that because he was trying to work things out with her.
Okay. All right. So going back to what I had asked before, who went to a divorce lawyer first? We don't necessarily know about that, but in your opinion, the way you remember it, it was Cindy who initiated the divorce proceedings.
Well,
She
she told him that
she
she
told him.
wanted a
Okay.
divorce, but my brother's the first one to see a divorce attorney about it.
Okay.
To
Great.
actually go through with doing something towards a divorce. If
Okay.
that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you. So he goes off to work.
Okay.
All right. I know, and it's very complicated, and I appreciate you clarifying that.
It's just so much I found out backwards.
Right. Right, and and the listeners will understand that, and that's why we're doing it this way. We're gonna get to all. There's a lot of things to fill in after the fact on this, but I'm trying to do this the way you understood things at the time, and then we can go back and talk about what you learned later. So Jonathan goes to work. So when he comes back to Mississippi, does he end up getting his own place then?
Yes.
Okay. And just in general, how far is this place from where he lived with Cindy and where Cindy continued to live? How far? Just in miles or minutes? Fine.
Approximately 5 miles or so, 5 to 6 miles.
Okay, so not far. Not far.
Yeah, not far.
Okay, so then that happens in April. He gets his own place when he comes back. You find out that this divorce is in the works in the beginning of May. That month of May of last year, 2018, what do you personally remember about that month? And then we will move up to May 31st. But just that month in general, were you talking to Jonathan, like every day or every other day? What do you remember about that month concerning Jonathan and Cindy?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to him some, but he didn't. I mean, he talked a little bit about Cindy, but most he was getting ready. Him and Amy were going to Washington, D.C. He was taking her to Washington, D.C., and it was going to be like the first time she'd be flying that she could
Hmm.
remember since she was a little kid,
Mm-hmm.
and it was going to be just him and her. And they went and spent a whole week there, and I mean, he was excited. He posted
Wow.
pictures all over Facebook, for everybody. Then the same week that him and Amy were gone to Washington, D.C., Bryce was up here at my parents' house.
Okay.
So, because Bryce would come over and play. I have custody of my granddaughter, so my granddaughter lives with me. And Bryce would come over and go swimming with my granddaughter in the pool and stuff that week. Or Kaylee would go over to Daddy and them and stay while I worked. And then when John and Amy got back from Washington, D.C., they flew into New Orleans, and John drove from New Orleans up to my parents' house in Tupelo and brought Amy up here. And
Wow.
Amy and Bryce stayed that week at my parents' house, and John went back home. And
Okay.
that was like the week leading up to May 30th.
May 31st. Okay. So John sounds to me was pretty busy that month between work and time with his daughter, one on one, going to Washington, D.C.
Correct.
Okay. Great. And he made time. Obviously, he would have had to have taken time off of work and everything to do that. And that's pretty special for him to take that time out to be with his daughter. That's pretty good. Okay. So let's move up to May 31st, 2018. A lot went on that day. A lot went on that day. Please tell, first of all, when did you hear, first of all, before getting into all this, when did you hear about all this stuff? Did you hear about it right away on May 31st, or did you hear about it June 1st? How do you remember it now? When did you first learn about it?
No. I did not know anything about it until a couple weeks after
Wow.
it happened.
Okay. All right. I want the listeners to keep that in mind, and we'll get into maybe the reasons why that is. But what have you learned about that day, May 31st, 2018? It's quite a bit. Take your time explaining what you were told about that day.
Well, first, leading up to that day, my brother had come back from my parents' house, and he had been going over to Cindy's house and making repairs to the trailer that him and Cindy had, since the kids and Cindy was going to be living there, just fixing things that needed fixing, putting down new floors and repairing and patching the walls and to make it a livable place for his kids. So he had been spending money and going over there and fixing up that week because the kids weren't there. They were at my parents' house. Then on the 31st, he was going over there to talk to her about what the attorney had said so they could work out everything. And something happened. I don't know what happened. I know Cindy made allegations of one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's ever seen or talked to John. After all we know is what John has told other people, that, like Kevin, his best friend.
Okay.
I know there was some type of domestic violence that happened. And
Okay.
then from there,
let's break that down.
a whirlwind.
Yeah, it certainly is a whirlwind. In general, what does Cindy say happened that day? And in general, what's Jonathan's story about what happened at their house that day? To keep it as simple as possible. Okay.
Yeah, Cindy says that my brother raped her at gunpoint. My brother told his best friend that him and Cindy had got into it because he told Cindy he was quitting his job and wasn't going to be working out of town anymore, was getting a job locally, and she blew up about it. And she jumped on him, and he was sitting on the couch, and he got up from the couch and threw her off of him and started out the door, and she jumped on his back again. And he got her off of him and started towards his truck and said when he was going to his truck that she come running out the door and got in her car and run him over when he was trying to get in his truck, and then ran down the driveway, and her car passed him peeling out the driveway. And from there, we assume she went to the police station because that's where she showed up at to make her charges.
Okay. So she didn't bother to call when it was happening, if this happened, that he raped her at gunpoint. She didn't bother to call 911. Seemingly instead she chose to drive, and my understanding it to the police station was a little ways away, maybe 10 miles or something like that.
Correct. It would be a good, 15-20 minute drive from where they live to get to the police station, because you'd have to go through stop signs and red lights and.
Wow. Okay. All right. So she did that. Is there any reason, to bring it back to Jonathan, if she tried to run him over with her car and everything, is there a reason he didn't call 911? To your knowledge, any reasons?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know. I believe that my brother knows that they got into it, and she probably was telling him she was calling the law because she had called the law on him before, I know, when they lived in Starkville.
Okay.
And, she had called the law on him, told him that, and I'm sure he was scared or whatever and didn't know what she was going to tell him, so he was probably just going to let things cool down is
Okay.
my belief that my
All right.
brother would be, because he's not like a violent person. I mean, you won't find anybody that would ever say he's
Okay.
probably just going to let things cool down, would be
Okay.
why I would think he wouldn't.
Okay. But if she did try to run him down with his car, he didn't call 911 either.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And were there any
I
witness?
know she
Please.
hit him with the car because she told the police she hit him with her.
She did. Okay. We'll come back. All right. We'll come back to that. Thank you. Okay. So, were there any witnesses to this? Were their children there? Did any neighbors see this? Anything?
No, their children were still at my parents' house
Okay.
that night.
All right. So really, it's just his word against her word as to what went on.
Correct.
Pretty much, even though it seems that you're saying she did admit that she did try to run him down with her car, but maybe she's saying she did that because she was afraid of him. We don't. Maybe that's the reason. But somehow in all of this, it ended up that the truck that Jonathan usually drove stayed at her house. Why did that happen?
Um, he told Kevin when he was leaving and going down the road that the stolen vehicle thing activated in his truck, and I'm from what I've been told, he had done that before to track him down.
Okay.
So he turned around in his truck and took it out and parked his truck back behind their trailer in the hayfield so that she couldn't track him down.
Okay, so there was some sort of, when you say track him down, there's some sort of factory installed GPS on his truck for
Yeah.
this? Okay.
Yeah.
I realize that very, very new vehicles do have that. I don't think I have that on my car, but I do know that there are theft. I'm just being honest.
His
That
truck was loaded.
it sounds like it. Sounds like a nice truck. But there's a way, kind of an anti-theft device type of thing that a lot of vehicles
Correct.
have these days. Okay.
Yeah,
And
you can like activate it to unlock doors and stuff like that if
Right.
you lock yourself out of your vehicle and stuff.
okay. And Cindy, even though she didn't normally drive that truck, she had access to this device, this mechanism. She knew how to engage it, turn it on, I guess.
Somebody logged in and paid for it on a credit card
Okay.
on, hold on, because I found all this later when
Okay.
and I'm sure we'll talk about this later when I
Okay.
gained access to
We're gonna definitely talk about that, but
the somebody logged in and paid to activate it on May 31st at
Okay.
10:38 p.m. Someone
All right.
activated it on a credit card.
okay. So it seems that Jonathan then was telling the truth, that he did get in his vehicle. Something happened, and he goes, well, I don't want her knowing where I'm going to be, where I'm going, and everything. So he turns around, leaves his truck, even though it's his, the one he normally drove, just leaves it at their house, even though it's the house that she's living in now. He's living somewhere else.
Correct.
Okay. And he parked it, you said, not like in the drive wherever he parked it behind?
He parked it. You got to think it's a real rural town.
Okay.
To describe for your listeners, it's a rural town, and where they lived, her dad is like raises cattle.
Mm-hmm.
So their property all around them was like her dad's cattle.
Okay.
And then behind that is a hayfield. So he had took the truck and parked it back on the back side of the hayfield.
Okay.
Like that behind some bushes hidden on the back side of the hayfield.
Okay. And and Jonathan at the time, before he disappeared, he did admit that. He told that to his friend Kevin, and listener show, I got to speak to Kevin, and I will tell you about my discussion with him after this interview is over. But this is what Jonathan told
Well,
Kevin.
he told Kevin that he parked it in the field back behind the house. I don't know how descriptive he was. I just know where the truck was found according to the law.
Okay. Thank you. All right, let's move on to this. But he doesn't end up walking. He ends up calling his a neighbor, and what does she say about that, about picking John up, etc.?
She says that on the early morning of June 1st, because this incident happened with them that night, the 31st, that early morning, that morning of June 1st, that she got a message from my brother that asked her could she do him a favor. And she asked him what. And he asked her, can you come pick me up? And she asked him what was wrong with his truck. And he told her, just come pick me up and I'll tell you about it when you get here. So she said she went and picked him up off the side of the road. And he wanted to go up to the store and get a pack of cigarettes. So she took him up to the truck stop, got a pack of cigarettes, and then they went back to their house. She lived on one side and John lived on the other side, like they were neighbors, you know.
Okay.
She said John walked into his house, and then she said on their way there from the truck stop to their house that John was on the phone with somebody, like he called somebody or somebody called him. She don't know because he was on the phone when he come out of the store. Said that he was talking to somebody, and when he got off the phone, he told her, ma'am, me and Cindy got into it. I don't know what's going on. She said she was calling the cops, and she said she told John she could take him down to the police station and figure out what's going on. And she said, John said, no, just take me home. I got a buddy that's going to come pick me up, and we're going to go figure this out. So she said they went home. John went over to his house, and she said her little boy was playing outside, and she said she was nosy. So she sat outside and watched John's house, you know, most of the day because she wanted to know who was going to pick him up. And she said she never seen anybody come by there to pick John up. She said the police rode up and down the street and that they stopped a couple of times and they asked her had she seen John's truck. And she told them no, she hadn't seen John's truck because she hadn't seen John's truck. And she said they had a roadblock set up there some that weekend, but she said she never seen John leave and she never seen anybody pull into John's house.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me break this down maybe with the listeners. Let me ask you a couple questions. So we know that this device on his truck got turned on at like 10:30 to 11 o'clock on May 31st. And then early the next morning, so like 12:31 in the morning is when she picked Jonathan up on the side of the road?
I don't know the exact time, but she said it was early morning. Like, I don't know the exact time.
Okay. All right.
She picked him up. I just know it was early morning because I've only got to talk to her like once, maybe twice.
Okay. So early morning could be 1 in the morning. It could be 7 in the morning. You're just not sure.
Correct.
Okay. And so then she says that Jonathan claims somebody was going to come pick him up, but because, like you said, she's nosy, she kind of just hangs around looking out the window, see if anybody comes over the day of June 1st. And from what she saw, nobody ever came over to Jonathan's place, and she never saw Jonathan that day either.
Correct.
Okay. But she did say that the cops stopped in at her place. Even though they were looking for Jonathan, they stopped at her place to ask if she had seen him.
She was sitting outside, she said, while her son was playing. When they were riding up and down the road, they stopped and asked her, had she seen John's truck? And she said she told them no, she hadn't seen his truck. She said they didn't ask her, had she seen John?
Okay. All right. And did she ever give you the name or names of the police officers that were going up and down the road that day?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. So June 1st passes. She doesn't see anything. Nobody sees John or anything. So let's move on till the next day, which is June 2nd, 2018, which for all intents and purposes officially is the date of his disappearance. What have you learned about that day?
June 2nd, I know that John texted with a guy that he works with named Brett. And I know that he had a conversation on the phone with Kevin. Kevin was the last known conversation that my brother had, like
Mm-hmm.
talking to somebody. And he told Britt that he was going down to the sheriff's department to figure out what was going on, and he talked to him later that he wasn't going to be into work that day. And he told Kevin had told him when they were talking, hey, man, I'll come pick you up, and we'll go down there and figure out what's going on. And John told him, no, man, there's no need in that. The cops are riding up and down my road. I'm going to walk to the end of the driveway and figure out what's going on. I'll call you later. And then nobody has heard from my brother since then.
Okay. Did you also tell me, maybe I got it mixed up in my notes, and as the listeners know, when we do these interviews, we do use an outline that I put together, but in my notes, is it true that he might have even texted a cop that morning or something about going down? Okay,
The time
please.
around 11:11, he had texted one of the Lincoln County officers that he knows and had told him that he was coming down to talk to them to figure out what was going on.
Okay. And do you know what's the officer's name?
I don't know his name. I
Oh,
don't want to
okay.
say.
All right. Okay.
Can't remember. They showed me the text, but I cannot remember his name.
Okay. So it is verified that he did text a police officer that he knew with Lincoln County, that there was plans for June 2nd. At some point, Jonathan was going to go down to the police station and kind of sort all of this stuff out
Correct.
regarding him and Cindy.
Correct.
That's your understanding. Okay. And then sometime after that, he does talk to Kevin. And like I said, I'll say it again. I talked to Kevin about this discussion. And the last thing Jonathan said to him was, I saw these police officers or whoever driving up and down the road. I'm going to go see about that. And that is the last person that you've been able to locate who talked to Jonathan.
Correct. It's the last conversation according to his subpoenaed phone records, according to the police that Jonathan talked to.
Okay. Okay. Very good. All right. Thank you. All right. So that was that day. And then something after that, something happened. Okay. When did someone realize that your brother Jonathan was missing?
Now, this is where it's weird. I did not know for a couple weeks until the middle of June that my brother was missing.
Okay.
Okay, so, but from my understanding is the night of June 2nd, that evening, after John had told Kevin that he was going down there and everything, Kevin and my dad had talked. And Kevin called down to Lincoln County and told them, hey, my buddy John Estes is down there, and tell him that his dad said that he's got him a lawyer and for him not to say anything. And they told Kevin that my brother wasn't there. And that's when I guess my dad and Kevin realized something was wrong because John wasn't where he said he was going.
Right. Right, because he said he was going to go down there, and then the police say, no, haven't seen him.
Correct.
Haven't seen him.
So Kevin and my dad at that time started trying to find John. But I didn't know that my brother was missing at that time because my dad hadn't said anything to ananybody else.
Okay.
They were, just trying to find John, I guess, on their own and not alarm everybody or something.
Right.
I don't know.
Okay. Right. Well, that happens sometimes. That's not totally unusual. So I understand that maybe he didn't want to tell you right away. 2 weeks. I'm not here to get in the middle of family stuff. Sounds a little long. But I don't know. I don't know. Okay. So you didn't, and we'll find, and I will eventually ask you what you thought, but we're just trying to keep this in the timeline. When Kevin and your father found out that Jonathan had never shown up at the police department, did somebody, they tried calling him? What happened? Did it go straight to voicemail? Did it ring? Do you know?
Yes, they called, they texted, my dad sent emails. Kevin had my understanding, Kevin had went over by the house. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they couldn't find John nowhere. Nobody could. Kevin was calling people, like, friends, anybody he could think of. No, people were even calling him because they had heard, because Cindy started, I guess, calling people,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So then everybody was calling everybody looking for John.
And
But nobody called me, which was odd. Nobody called
mm,
my brother.
hmm,
Even Cindy, you would think if she was looking for my brother, she would have reached out to his brother and sisters.
okay. I agree.
But she didn't.
I agree. I guess what I'm asking, just from a technical point of view, when people were trying to call Jonathan, was it ringing and ringing and ringing, or did it act like the phone was shut off, meaning it goes straight to voicemail? Do you know?
It was going to voicemail,
Okay.
is my understanding.
Okay. And you said Kevin did go over to the house. Was that June 3rd, June 4th?
It was
And
a couple days later.
okay, and what do you see?
The house was a mess.
And maybe to be a little more specific, can you
The
give some
locks on
examples?
my brother's
Examples.
trailer, the locks on my brother's trailers were cut, and my understanding from Kevin was that he put the locks on the trailer because my brother asked him to, after they had moved some of John's stuff from John and Cindy's place to John's place. They put the
Mm,
locks on the trailer.
okay.
The house just had was like somebody was looking for something or stuff. Stuff was strewn all over the house. There was clothes all in the floor. The
Mm,
TV was sitting down in the floor.
wow. And a lot of things were stolen, and we're going to get into that a little later. But there was definitely signs that somebody had gone over there and taken things, trashed things. Surely it would not have been the way that Jonathan would have left his place that he now had separate from Cindy's.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Okay, and I'm sure Kevin reported back to your father and maybe some other people about what he saw, and I'm sure that alarmed them quite a bit. The police, would they take a missing persons report?
No, not at first when this happened. They kept telling me there was no need for a missing person report, that they were looking for my brother as a wanted person, but that he would show up, not to worry about it.
And why was he a wanted person?
Because of the allegations that Cindy had made against him.
Okay. So going back to May 31st, they have some sort of confrontation. We're not sure what happened because there are no witnesses, but she went to the police department. Would that be Lincoln County that she
It
went to?
would be.
Lincoln County. She goes down there, says that Jonathan tried to rape her at gunpoint. So now the police are looking for him, and that's why they were possibly riding up and down his road looking for him and his truck. Is that the way you interpret things at that point?
Correct. But they never got out of their vehicles and went
Mm-hmm.
to his door, from my understanding, and knocked on his door or went inside his house. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there was never anything announced to the public that there was this man that they were searching for that was wanted for this, aggravated assault or whatever you wanted to call it.
Mm-hmm.
They never asked for the public's help in locating him.
Okay. Yeah, it may be they did get out. Maybe the neighbor didn't see it. That's possible, but there's no proof of that. There's no proof they got out, even though it's not like people were keeping their eyes on the police 24/7. But they were definitely looking for him. And the reason they wouldn't take a missing persons report is because of these allegations. So they thought he was on the run.
Correct.
Okay, that he was running because he actually did do this to Cindy and knew that he did and didn't want to have to answer for those charges. Okay. Um, During that time, once again, I realize you didn't find out a couple weeks later. Did Kevin or your father, since they knew that he was supposed to be showing up at the police department, is there a reason that the police weren't bothered that Jonathan didn't show up June 2nd when he said he was going to? Do you know?
Um, to my understanding, no, because my dad and Kevin, and my understanding is John's boss, Britt, were all talking with the detective
Mm-hmm.
that was initially over this investigation. They were talking to Detective Falvey and telling him that something wasn't right, that the last thing John told them was that he was coming in to talk to them to straighten this out, and now he's just, nobody can get a hold of him, that something wasn't right. But he just, like, wasn't listening to that. He was like, oh, he's going to turn up, he's just running, he's just scared. You know,
Okay.
no matter who was coming in and telling him or calling him, it was the same thing from him. Oh, no, he's not missing. He's just on the run. He's going to show up. Just ride it out.
Okay. Did the police chief or the sheriff or whatever his position is called, did he ever reveal the reason that some deputies, police officers, once again, whatever you call them in your county, were riding up and down? Did they admit that they were riding up and down Jonathan's road trying to find him? Did they ever talk about that?
When I had a scheduled meeting with them in January of 2019, yes, they said that they did have officers that were riding up and down there.
Okay.
I asked them at that time, could they tell me who was riding and patrolling that area? And he had told me he was going to check the logs and get back with me, but they still never got back to me with that.
All right. So this is June 22nd, 2019, that we are doing this interview, and they told you that in January. 6 months later, they've not given you that information.
Correct.
Okay.
They also got my brother's phone records in January, and they told me in January that his phone records, the last place that my brother's phone was pinging was in the Jean Road area on June 2nd. And Jean Road is the road he lived on.
Okay. But you've never actually seen those records.
Correct.
Okay, and we will talk about the phone records a little more detail a little later. But to summarize, on June 2nd, Jonathan is at home. He talks to his buddy Kevin. First, he says that he's going to go down to the police station regarding these charges. I guess he must have an idea that the cops are looking for him for what happened a couple days before. I think he probably knew that Cindy maybe had let them know whether calling or driving there, so he knows that they're looking for him. And he says he has plans to go down to the police station. He sees these police officers riding up and down the road. Eventually, they do admit that they were doing that. He speaks to his friend Kevin and says, I'm going to go outside to see what these cops want who are riding up and down the road. And that is the last anybody heard from him was that on June 2nd.
Correct.
That's to summarize everything that we've talked about just for that day. Of course, we got into a little more detail there, but just so the listeners can appreciate. Do you even know what time of the day it was that Jonathan would have been going outside after talking to Kevin? Any ideas?
I believe the conversation with Kevin was somewhere between 2 to 3 o'clock.
Okay. All right, so that takes us up to the disappearance day, and like you said, you wanted to file a missing persons report. Cops are blowing you off. That happens a lot in all sorts of different types of cases, and it's especially weird in this one because here Jonathan said he was going to be going to the police department. He doesn't show up, and doesn't seem the police are too bothered by that, but maybe that's just my perception. Okay, let's get into the rest of this, and this is what we're going to be talking about the rest of the time, what we call the rest of the case, and we're going to get into a lot more of the details for the listeners because there is certainly a lot to talk about, and unfortunately, we have to start here because I think that will maybe help the listeners understand maybe a little more about John and Cindy's relationship and maybe what was going on in March, April, May of 2018.
Of course, it took a while for you to find out that your brother was even missing, but when did you find out that John and Cindy, at least for a while at some point, um, had been getting together with other couples to swing, swap, um, things like that? When did you learn about that?
Oh, January of this year when I found the videos and the screenshots of messages that Bryce had sent his daddy.
Okay, and we're going to talk about those next. Was that, did anybody else, you didn't find out to January. Do you have the idea that other people in your family had already known about that, or would you say that was something that Jonathan and Cindy had kept pretty secret?
It was pretty secret from family. In fact, there's probably family that's going to be shocked.
Oh, okay. So there's some family members that don't even know at this point. Okay. All right. And we're just going to try to keep this as PG as possible. Do you have any idea how long this had been going on before 2018, 2017, 16? Any ideas at all?
My understanding from what I found out now from talking to people that were aware of it, it's
Okay.
been going on for several years, but John had wanted, it had all started to make her happy, and then John wanted to stop, and the deal was they weren't supposed to do it unless they were both together, was what I was told the understanding was. But then John found out that she was doing it on her own when he wasn't at home, when he was working out of town.
Okay.
So
Right.
that's what started a lot of the turmoil.
Okay, so he's once again he's has this job that he had for 15 years in construction. He's going to Texas, elsewhere. She's at home. She does have her own job, but the kids are with her. And when he was gone, she was getting together with other couples and maybe other men.
But she didn't work the whole time they were together. She worked when she wanted to work.
Okay. Okay.
You know, she didn't have to work.
Okay. All right, you already mentioned this. Bryce is there at the time. I think he was 12 years old, 11, 12 years old. But you'd already talked about these videos, pictures, emails. Please explain everything about this, including how you eventually found it, everything about these videos, pictures, etc.
Well, Bryce and John were really close. And I guess Bryce was looking through Cindy's phone one day and he ran across messages between Cindy and other men and other couples and pictures of other couples and other men and stuff on Cindy's phone, and he took screenshots of it and he sent the screenshots to his daddy.
And when was this? And it was this was in 2018 sometime?
Yes, this was between in April-May period of
Okay.
2018.
Okay, so right around the time that they were talking about divorce, and she,
Right around the time of the video that my brother made.
right, and we're going to talk about that too. It's a whole different video. But Bryce was in his mother's phone. She finds these things, and he sends the stuff to his dad.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Do you think at the time, the way you understand things, do you think that she knew that Bryce had discovered the stuff and sent it to Jonathan?
No, because Bryce called her a name, and she didn't know why Bryce called her that name.
Okay. Okay. Sometime after he discovered all of this stuff. Okay. All right.
I believe it was the same day he discovered the stuff that he called his mama a name.
Okay. Now, the big part of this though is that, and at the time, do you think that Jonathan, when he got this, I'm going to guess that he had plans to show it to his divorce lawyer and everything. Did he share any of this with Kevin, any other friends of his, or was this something that he kind of kept under wraps?
He kept it under wraps, except for there were a few people, and John had mentioned to me that that if she didn't do things civilly, that he had stuff on her. And he had made the comment to Kevin that when this was all and done, that he was going to expose her to her parents for who she really is. I said he was saving it to use, like, if he needed to.
Okay. All right. In divorce proceedings, he could have this information and use it against her, probably most likely to get custody of his kids.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And I should have asked you this before because I told you I was going to ask you, but I didn't. You didn't find out until a couple weeks later that Jonathan was missing. This is kind of backtracking just for a moment. When you found out that he hadn't been seen for a couple weeks, what did you think?
Well, I tried calling everybody I could think of to figure out where he was. I tried calling his phone, of course. Nothing, you know. I tried to send him a message on Facebook. Nothing. I called everybody I could think of that John and I know in common. I called everybody in the Northwest, like his best friends out there, even ex-girlfriends that he's still friendly with. Like I told you, nobody dislikes John. I mean, you know. I tried everybody, and nobody could find John. I tried to call and talk to Detective Falve and tell him, you know, something's not right. I can't find my brother nowhere. And he's like, oh, no, we've been told he's hiding in the Northwest, that he's working out there. I'm like, no, my brother's not. Believe me. You know, I've contacted everybody he went to high school with. Everybody out there was posting up little flyers I had made up because they were sharing them out there and posting them around town. You know, everybody was looking for him then just to figure out, hey, you know, where are you at, John? What's going on? You know, but nothing. Nobody could find John. Something wasn't right.
Okay. Well, thank you for saying that. I'm going to ask you this again, though. What did you think happened to John when you knew that he was missing for 2 weeks? Did you have a knee-jerk reaction to it?
I told my husband something's not right.
Okay. Okay. All right.
That was my reaction.
Okay.
You know, something is not right.
So you find out that he's missing sometime in the middle of June, and ever since then, you've of course done many interviews, including this one, and I know that you're planning to do at least one other one that I know about here in a couple weeks. But getting back to uh, these videos and pictures, etc., please explain to the listeners how you eventually found them, because my understanding is Jonathan, once he got them from Bryce, it's not like he put them in a place, the files, that they would be easy to find. How did you end up finding them?
I had, for a while, I just looked for John by posting on social media, by reaching out to media outlets, trying to get any type of coverage of anything to help find him. And then I started wanting to, on my own, research and see what I could find on his social media. Who was he talking to last? Did he reach out to anybody when this first happened? Well, I was trying to break in his email. I mean, that sounds bad, but I was desperate. I was a desperate sister.
Sure.
I was just trying to break in everything, and everything that I would do would tell me I needed a code from his phone. And I'm like, well, he doesn't have this phone. I mean, I don't know what to do. And I just tried it one day, and the phone rang. And it was this boy that answered, a teenage boy. He had got this phone for a Christmas present. It was like he graduated from school this year in May, but he had got this phone for a Christmas present. He was like a little weirded out and shocked, like, you know, but we talked with his mom, and she worked with me to when I would log on somewhere and it would send a code to the phone because, I didn't realize everything's just tied to a phone number.
Mm-hmm.
So it would send a code to that phone, and she would give me the code, and I would enter it onto the Facebook or in his email, in his iCloud, and it gave me access so I could go in and then change it to like
All right.
my phone
Boy,
number,
you're really going to have to
somebody
explain.
else's phone number.
Okay. You're really going to have to explain that. So you're saying that he did that, and already your brother's phone number was being used by somebody else.
By Christmas of December 2017, yes.
2018.
Yes, 2018. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
That's all right. I know. Dates can get a little confusing. That's fine. So he disappears in June, and already by the end of the year, the telephone company, whatever company it is, had already given his cell phone number to somebody else. And my opinion is you got quite lucky that it had been given to somebody else because that allowed you to get access to it.
Yes, I was shocked.
Wow.
You know.
That is a crazy story. That's a crazy story. Very fortunate. Oh, okay. And do you think that there is anything suspicious about this? Are you sure, I have to ask, are you sure that this family who now has the phone and the phone number have nothing to do with Jonathan's disappearance?
Um, I'm suspicious of everybody, but I don't believe so. I mean,
Okay.
this lady and her son have been very helpful. Anything that I asked, they didn't have to do that. They could have thought I was some crazy lady.
I bet.
Hung up on me. But, because, how odd would that sound if somebody called you and it's like, hey, my brother's been missing for 6 months and this was his phone number and can you help me reset his passwords? Come on.
I know. That's crazy.
Crazy.
It is. It's one of the more unlikely stories that I've heard doing Unfound, and we're coming up on the 3-year anniversary. That is a very unlikely story, but I'm, of course, glad it happened. So you get
very appreciated.
right.
This lady and her son. I cannot thank them enough.
Right, of course. So that's how you got into his email, and that's where he had, I guess you could say, hid these files?
Yes, they were hidden deep in his email. They weren't just in a file that you would find, when you just scan through his email. He had hid them inside files. I was scouring through his emails, looking at every file, looking at just searching for anything that might tell me where my brother is.
Of course. And these files, pictures and everything, would you say that many of them were X-rated?
Somewhere, yes.
Somewhere. And these were the pictures and maybe text to maybe emails, but video that Bryce had found on his mother's phone and sent them to Jonathan. This is what you found.
Correct.
Okay. And to your knowledge, you were the first person to run across them in there? You don't think anybody had run across them before?
No.
No. Okay. All right. And I have to ask, after this happened, the end of 2018, which is only 6 or 7 months ago, have you ever been able to speak to Bryce about this?
No, we have not spoke. Nobody in our family has spoke to the children. My parents returned them to Cindy the morning of June 1st.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And nobody's been able to speak to him or Jonathan's daughter since then?
Correct.
Wow. Nobody, at least on your side of the family. Okay.
Correct. Even John's best friend and them, who the kids used to hang out at their house all the time, has never seen them since this happened.
Right. Okay.
Brass has called Kevin a few times because he snuck to call Kevin, but then that's been cut off.
Okay. All right, but we know that Bryce did that because when Jonathan received this stuff, he had told a couple people what Bryce did. That's how we know that Bryce did this, because Jonathan told other people that he did it.
Correct.
Okay. Now, let's go to one of the pieces of information that I have been able to see, And at least as of June 22nd, the plan is to post this video before the episode comes out, but I'm leaving it up eventually to Melissa, whether we are going to stick to that or not, because it is a video that she found. She has the right to change her mind at any time. However, it may be when you're listening to this, when this comes out at the end of June 2019, that there's a video out that you can watch, but we're going to just talk through it for now. This is one of the pieces of information that Bryce had sent to his father, and it's a video, you're understanding it's from May 10th of 2018?
Correct, around that time.
Okay.
I
And
don't want to be specific about
okay.
dates. But
Okay.
around that time.
All right. So we have to remember that it was in April that kind of this divorce got started, the talking, and it seems that Cindy was the one that initiated it, and then we have to remember that May 31st was the day that they had their confrontation. So about halfway, somewhere in between there, this video was taken, and please explain what is going on in the video.
My brother had come in from the road that weekend and was coming to their place, his and Cindy's, to get some of his stuff because he was taking it to his place. And he didn't want a big confrontation, so he called the law to come out there and meet them while he got his stuff out. And for some reason, while he was there, because I didn't know until I found this video, for some reason, he turned his phone on and just videoed while he was standing there at the door. And you can see that 15 minutes. I mean, in the video, he talks about when the law passes and then they turn around and come back. And when they come back, he turns it off. But, I mean, he felt the need to video for some reason, you know.
Right.
And for the law to come stand there while he's taking his stuff out.
Right. And in this video, once you watch the video, then you get an idea of what Bryce had sent him. Does Jonathan ask Cindy or accuse her of these things that Bryce sent to him? You know, relationships with other couples, etc.
Yes. Yes, this is the first time I believe that he told her of what he had. Because he says in there, you want to know why your son called you that name? This is why. Because that's the first time he had confronted her about what Bryce had sent him was in this video.
Right.
Is what I believe. Just from the things that he said. And he stayed so calm.
Yes. Yes, that was my overall... It's an argument, but nobody swears. And nobody really loses their mind or anything else, but it's certainly an argument. It was very a unique situation, almost a little creepy, but we should know that certainly Cindy knew that she was being videotaped. Certainly.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, you could tell he was videoing. I'm sure the kids knew that, you know. You could tell that he was pointing at her. She had to have known. It's not like he was hiding it.
No. Right. This was not some sort of candid camera situation where the phone was hidden in the room, you know, like some undercover sting or anything. He was holding it up, and she's there, and she's across the room and talking back and forth. But what does she say to Jonathan about this divorce that's going to happen regarding the kids?
I mean, she says, well, she doesn't say much in the video at first, except for, you know, he's crazy, that, you know, she doesn't say much at all until he starts bringing stuff up. And then she's telling him he's crazy, he doesn't know what he's talking about until he starts verbally saying things to her that were word for word in the text messages that Bryce sent him.
Yeah.
Then you could see, like, her whole reaction change.
I agree with that. You know? I agree with that.
And from there, she told him that she would make sure he never sees his kids again.
Yes. And I want you to repeat that for the listeners. My recollection in watching the video, and I just watched it yesterday, it was fairly early on. It's a 15-minute video. I'm guessing it's somewhere around the 3-minute mark. that she says that. Could you please state that again? What does she say? And if a divorce would happen?
Him, yeah, she tells him that she will make sure he never sees his kids again.
Right. That is on the video. That's not something that Melissa's making up. It's not something that I'm making up. But the video have the evidence that she did say that. He, of course, confronted her about the pictures and everything. Does she deny all of it in the video?
No, she doesn't deny it. She tells him that he's crazy, though, but she doesn't deny it. And when he brings up one certain person who happens to be, I believe, either a former officer or he still is, I'm not sure, she tells him, well, that was 10 years ago or something. I mean, she doesn't deny things, but she doesn't say, well, yes, I did, but when you don't deny it.
That's right. And like I said,
she tells him that
please.
he made indiscretions too, you know. I mean, I'm not saying my brother was perfect, because he was not. They both did things, you know, that they shouldn't have done throughout their marriage. But still, you know, they both deserve to still be here.
That's true, and you're right. And we should be fair regarding this. Cindy makes some accusations against Jonathan in this argument that they have as well. Once again, I don't know if they're true or not. There was, of course, talk about marijuana and some other things in the discussion that she accuses of him. I have no idea whether it's true or not. But I think that the video does give an idea of where their relationship was less than a month before he disappeared.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. There is one thing in the video that he keeps bringing up about the previous Friday that Cindy was with somebody else. Have those allegations that Jonathan made ever been proven or disproven, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
Have not been proven. All right.
Correct.
Because once again, if the video is, if we were to make that public, he does talk about last Friday night, and I'm just wondering if that actually was something that's true. Has anybody ever looked into that? But you don't know one way or the other.
Correct.
Okay. And just to explain to the listeners, it's about 15 minutes long. And then when the police do show up at the house is when he shuts the video off. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about Cindy and the neighbor that picked Jonathan up when he couldn't use his truck. What did she see? What did the neighbor see? Maybe the next day, June 3rd, June 4th, after Jonathan disappeared. What did she see?
She said a couple days after all this has happened. I don't know the exact days, and she didn't say. She just said a couple days after that she noticed Cindy and the little girl were coming over and taking things from John's house. But she said that Amy and Bryce had a key to John's house. So she noticed them going in and out, but she says she never noticed John and hadn't heard anything like, you know, about John. So she said it bothered her. So she called their landlord because she wanted their landlord. She said she was having nightmares at night. She couldn't sleep. So she called their landlord because they both had the same landlord and wanted him to go in John's house and check and make sure that John wasn't in there dead.
Right. Okay, and I just want to go back to something that his friend Kevin said when Kevin went over a few days later. He said that Jonathan's place had been trashed. Are we then to believe that the reason it was trashed is because Cindy and Jonathan and Cindy's daughter Amy were over there?
That is my assumption.
That's assumption. Okay, but they were over there before Kevin, the friend, got over there.
Correct.
Okay. And did the neighbor ever say she saw anybody else over there in those few days after Jonathan disappeared? Anybody else?
No, she never did say if she's seen anybody else.
Okay. All right, and this is going to be important later. Of course, the neighbor picked John up. I'm just going to go through this to remind the listeners, because once again, we got a lot going on here. The neighbor is the same person who picked John up on late May 31st or early June 1st, took him back to his house, watched his house, didn't see him. She saw the cops. There was a checkpoint set up. Let's talk about that for a moment. Was that a checkpoint that was specifically set up to find Jonathan, or was that checkpoint set up for some other reason? Do you know?
I don't know, but I'm going to say it was set up to find my brother.
Okay. Okay. And once again, she did say that some cops did stop at her place. I know you've only talked to her a couple times. Do you think it's possible that it's only been a year? Do you think she would be able to identify those police officers? Again, do you think?
Yes, it's a small town, and from
Mm-hmm.
my understanding, her aunt is a dispatcher with the county sheriff's department.
Okay. So, and being it's a small town, maybe she's even seen those deputies, police officers since. So it would be interesting to know who was out on the road the days before and if the day of when John disappeared. Of course, you've tried to get that information, haven't gotten it yet. Let's talk about the pickup truck. Remember, Jonathan left it at Cindy's because she turned some sort of tracking device on it. Um, what happened to the truck? Where was it found? Tell the listeners everything you think they need to know about the truck.
It was found in a hayfield on the backside of the property on the tree line, hidden by the tree line, is my understanding. I'm told that Kevin Menendez, John's friend, finally told them or told Cindy where the truck was, and that she rode back there and found the truck. And this is where it gets kind of weird,
Okay.
is because I never had really been told the whole story about the truck until I met with the sheriff's department in January, and then I actually was told their story. Before it had all just been rumor. But
Mm-hmm.
in January, when I met with them, they showed me a video that the officers took when they were looking through my brother's truck, and it was full of like papers. It had just papers everywhere, and it had a half bag of charcoal inside the truck, which was really odd because my brother kept his truck spotless. So, and that's all. I asked them then, who called the truck in? Like, how was the truck called in? And at first they told me it was called in as an unlocked. And I said, well, who called it in as an unlocked? Because I know where the truck was found, because I had been told that by the public and everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to know who called it in. And they told me they didn't know. Hold on, let them go check. So they left the room, then they come back, and they told me, well, it had been called in as an abandoned vehicle. I said, okay, then who called it in as an abandoned vehicle? And they called down to dispatch, and dispatch said that Detective Falvey had actually called it in for them to dispatch some officers out there. So they got with Detective Falvey, and he said, well, Cindy had called him on his cell phone and told them that she had found the truck out in the hayfield. So they sent some officers out there, and they unlocked the truck and everything, and they videoed it with their body cameras, and looked through the truck, and then they left the truck there.
They left it there.
They never processed. Yes, they never processed the truck. I mean, I asked them when I met with them in January because I had questions about the truck. I wanted to know, how was it dispatched? What time was it dispatched? Where was the truck when the officers arrived? When was it first identified as being John's truck? Was it processed for evidence? Was his phone in it? Was his wallet in it? Who was the truck released to?
Sure.
Was there a gun in the truck? I mean, I had a ton of questions that they couldn't answer.
Okay. And so, are you saying that there is a bit of a discrepancy on how the truck was actually found? In your mind?
I believe I'm sorry?
In your mind, was there a discrepancy as to how the truck was found, who called it in, and how it was found?
I believe there is a discrepancy in how it was called in and who called it in, yes.
Okay. All right. And how many days after he disappeared? Of course, it was June 2nd, 2018. How long after Jonathan disappeared was the truck officially, when did they call it in? How many days after? Approximately.
A little over 2 weeks.
Okay.
A little over 2 weeks.
But the truck was on Cindy's father's property.
Correct. It was behind his cattle field in the hayfield, behind the hayfield.
Okay. The way you understand it, I've never been there. Maybe you were over to Cindy and John's house a couple times. In your opinion, is it possible that they did not see that truck where it was found for 2 weeks? Your opinion?
I know because my husband also worked for someone actually that he worked for the buffalo park here in Tupelo, and the owner has all the buffalo, but he also has cattle. And he worked for him for a while, and he used to ride the fields and stuff, checking cattle and the fences, because you check every inch of your property. And my husband said there's no way that John's truck would have been missed if you're riding the fields, counting your cattle and checking your fence line.
All right. So then what you're saying is it seems a little improbable that the truck would have sat out there for 2 weeks and nobody saw it.
Yeah, it's a white truck, and it was June. It was green. I mean, you know.
Okay. And were the keys in it? Was there, I mean, you saw the video. I realized the police couldn't tell you even close to as much as you wanted to know. Were the keys in it? Anything unusual about it?
No, the keys were not in it. My understanding was that the GPS fuse was pulled.
Huh. Did one of the police officers tell you that?
Yes.
Okay. So the GPS, that tracking system that Jonathan had talked about, was disabled.
Correct. It was disabled.
Okay. But the keys weren't in it. Were the keys for the truck ever found?
No.
0. Nothing. All right. So if we're to believe that, if that's where
Doors were locked.
Okay. Okay. So maybe Jonathan did park it there and took off and locked it and took the keys. And it could be maybe that he's the one that disabled the fuse. Possible?
Could be. Possible.
Could be. And maybe the day that he left and was going out on June 2nd to see what the cops wanted, he had the truck keys with him, maybe intending to go back there and get his truck now. Possible.
Possible.
Okay. But it is kind of strange that he parked the truck back there and nobody saw it. But once again, I am not familiar with the area. Okay. So where is the truck now? What happened to the truck?
My well, okay, go forward a little. In July of 2018, Cindy filed bankruptcy. My brother's truck was in Cindy's name. So when she filed bankruptcy, she conceded and gave up the truck and the trailer and my brother's boat and some credit card debt, and I think she included a little hospital debt in there. And that was within a month and a half of my brother being missing that she had filed bankruptcy. So the truck, because the truck was never taken in and processed for evidence or anything, my understanding is that the truck sat out there in the field. The she kept telling people the truck was being repossessed. It was not being repossessed. It was paid up to date until my brother went missing. Then she conceded it in her bankruptcy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it sat out there in the hayfield until the bank sent someone to get it, and then my understanding is her daddy pulled it out with the tractor to the road for them to get. But if the truck was in her name alone, she could have went right down there to the little Dodge dealership and got a key for the truck. I mean, maybe cost her $100, you know.
Okay. But she didn't do that.
Nope.
Okay.
It's my understanding.
Okay.
That's what the police told me, was that her daddy pulled it to the road with his tractor when the bank sent the people to pick it up.
And you told me that the truck eventually got sold and you actually had to like track it down using Carfax or something. Is that right?
Yeah, we found the truck at a dealership in Pensacola, Florida, and that's actually where Sean, a girl that went to high school with John in Post Falls, she's been helping me run John's page and do research and track down leads, and but she was living in Pensacola at that time, and when we found it, she went to the dealership. She found it on the internet at that dealership. The VIN number matched and everything. We were so excited, but when she got there, they had just sold the truck.
It sold it.
And she talked to them about it and gave them her number, and they told her that they would reach out to the new owners, you know, because we just wanted to look at the GPS history, you know.
Uh-huh. And
the new owners have never reached out to us.
Okay.
well, that's too bad. Maybe they'll hear our interview and change their minds or something. Hopefully that. And I didn't even know that they could keep the GPS records. That's very interesting, though. That's going to be possibly another lead that might expose itself. Hopefully soon, maybe.
And they may feel odd, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
when the dealership called them, like
Right.
odd, you know, kind of like the little boy when we had him
Sure.
help with John's phone number.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure. It could be the same thing. You're right. That's a good point. Okay. Well, at least you know where the truck is. If we're to believe that something dirty happened in this disappearance, and maybe it happened in the truck, you know, I know from experience covering enough cases that no matter how well vehicles are cleaned, things are always left behind. You know, so you know, it might come to that somewhere down the road if these new owners, you know, decide to help you out. Okay. We've talked about John's cell phone and the records. You've not seen the records, but you understand that the last ping was on John's road, which
Correct.
which would maybe coincide with the conversation that he had um, with Kevin. But the phone has never been found, right?
Correct.
Okay. And regarding the phone records, I had it in my notes here. Did the cops ask you about your family's phone numbers or something like that? And any idea why they did that?
They asked me about two phone numbers. One of them I knew, and they were asking about it because it was showing up on my brother's phone and it was showing up on Cindy's phone, but it was their daughter's phone number.
Okay.
And then the other one is a phone number that we've never been able to find out whose phone number it is. And my understanding is they have subpoenaed the phone records for that phone number to try to track down who owned that phone number. Because right now it's not an active phone number, but it was active when my brother went missing.
Okay. Do you know what that phone number is?
I do.
Okay. We're not going to do this publicly, but maybe after this interview is done, I would certainly like to know what that phone number is because myself and the people who helped me put together this program, we have ways of finding out these things. So, if you'd like, I could do that for you. We could do that for you. We'll talk about it after this interview is done. So, that's interesting. This number that we don't know what it is, Okay. But once again, you've never seen the phone records. Have you ever gone to being that you were so crafty about getting his email open, have you ever tried to get the phone records from the phone company yourself?
Um, we can't get them. I will be able to get them hopefully within the next couple of weeks because we have filed for conservatorship over John.
Okay.
So once we have conservatorship, then I will be able to see John's phone records, see John's bank records, see all of that myself.
Well, that's good. I'll be very interested to hear if you get the phone records and what they say. So that'll be that. Once again, another piece of information. And for the listeners, this is how these newer cases happen. There's new information. It seems popping up all the time in very, very new disappearances. And once again, Melissa, you should know in Unfound's world, a case that's a year old is very, very new. I know the last year has been hell for you and your family, but on our program, we cover cases. The average age is like 20 years old. And of course, things are very much different with those ones. Okay. One more interesting. I don't usually like to use adjectives regarding this, but this is the first time that a deer cam has popped up in a case that Unfound is covered. How did you find out about this? When did this happen, and why did it happen?
After my brother had been missing for a while, one of his friends come forward and contacted me and said, "Hey, John was suspecting something was going on, and to catch Cindy, he had climbed up in the tree and put his deer cam up there." Like, my brother has some pretty high dollar hunting gear and stuff, but he had deer cams that were motion detected, so they take pictures of like vehicles moving in and out of his driveway, different things like that. So he had climbed up there. He had done it before, is my understanding, and had got a couple pictures that my understanding is he showed a couple people, but they weren't clear enough for him to tell exactly who it was, so he got a better deer cam. He had climbed up in a tree and put it up there. And he had told a couple friends about it. Well, they were telling me about it, and I'm like, "Can you go get it?" And they're like, "I don't know. I mean, we talked about it because, it was on Cindy's dad's property there, and they'd have to sneak on there and climb up in a tree to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, they got the deer cam. That's all I'm going to say about that. And when we viewed the deer cam, you can see where my brother's up there in the tree, and he's setting the deer cam and everything, and he takes a couple pictures and makes sure that everything's set at the right angle. Then as he's climbing down the deer cam, he hit a button, and it turned the video on, and it videos for several hours,
Oh,
and then the battery dies.
right. But he did this because he suspected that
Correct.
Cindy was cheating on him. Do you know if this was before or after Bryce sent him those videos, pictures, and everything we've already talked about?
Before.
Before.
Before Bryce sent it.
Before. So he had a suspicion even before that.
Correct.
Okay. And this friend, is this Kevin or is it somebody else? You do not have to give a name if you don't want to.
Somebody else.
Somebody else. Okay. He told you about that. And did Jonathan ever tell this friend who he thought the person might be that Cindy was getting together with?
Yes.
Okay. Do you feel like I'm not saying giving a name, but are you comfortable in saying the position that this person was in? Hello?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment. Okay.
Think about it for
Okay. But okay. And I will tell you this.
only because there's some stuff that's going on.
Of course.
What I don't want to talk about.
Okay. I will tell you this, that I think the listeners, we could say this, that what you told me, what the friend said, is different from what Kevin told me. And I'm going to leave out who he said it was as well. Okay. I'm not going to tell the listeners, but who you told me the friend said, and who Kevin thought Jonathan was trying to catch on camera, are two different people with two different occupations. Okay, just so you know.
Correct.
All right, just so you know.
Yeah.
All right, so he was doing this because even before Bryce sent him sent him the X-rated pictures and videos and things, that Jonathan had a suspicion something was going on. Okay, but unfortunately, it seems he was not maybe totally successful in this endeavor.
Right.
Okay, all right, good plan. Just didn't quite.
My brother had hired or was hiring a PI. I have
Mm-hmm.
the emails where he had contacted a like firm and
Mm-hmm.
had been speaking with someone and stuff. He was
Okay.
real suspicious of a lot of it and was trying to collect as much as he could if he needed it.
Okay. And did he end up hiring? We don't have to give the name, but did he end up hiring a private investigator? And did this person do any good work? Anything that you know about?
I know that he got an email saying the reports were finished or the file was complete, and I know that she has been talked to,
Okay.
but I don't know what the police found out or anything like that. Like,
Okay.
because that was like information that I had gave to them, and they were looking into that. So I don't know like what the total outcome or if they got her report.
Okay. So this was kind of going on a couple different things. Bryce, looking through, maybe not intending to find what he found, is doing something. We have Jonathan, who's setting up a deer cam, suspecting something, and then on top of that, he went and got a private investigator who it seems had a report ready for Jonathan. Do you know if Jonathan ever saw that report or not?
No, because it was ready and sent to him after he came up missing.
Okay, after. Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the police. We talked about how they were out on the road that day. You personally believe that they set a checkpoint up to catch Jonathan, but if we're to believe them, we don't believe that it doesn't seem that they did catch him. He was supposed to head down to the police department that day. Of course, he didn't show up. But let me ask you this: you don't have to be a missing persons expert to be a little suspicious. Jonathan says he's going to go out to talk to the cops who are riding around outside, and then he disappears. And listeners know that in at least 10% of the cases that Unfound is covered, crooked cops are involved. That's a fact. I'm not making that up. And I can name some of the cases right off the top of my head right now. To your knowledge, did anybody in Cindy's family have any special relationships with anybody in the police department that maybe could have pulled some strings or something? To your knowledge?
To my knowledge, no. But I'm going to say, again, this is a small town
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of people are related to each other through cousins or, it's a real small
Right.
town.
Right. And I think I have to remind the listeners, at least regarding the truck, that when this truck was quote unquote discovered on the property, Cindy didn't call 911. She just happened to know the phone number of one of the officers to call, and he called it in.
Correct. She called his cell phone.
All right, so she just conveniently had some police officer's phone, who then reported the truck. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Um, you've had some interactions with the police. Do you think that they are aware of how kind of a little suspicious it looks in this case, being that Jonathan says he's going to go out to talk to him and then Jonathan disappears? Do you think that they're aware of that?
Yes, I've been very vocal of my concerns on how everything has been handled from the very beginning of this,
Mm-hmm.
of the fact of us just being pushed off and told, oh, he's going to turn up, he's going to turn up, he's going to turn up. It wasn't until after grand jury that they kind of took a little different approach to it.
All right,
And then only after we pushed and pushed hard, did they even start looking, and it was mostly after I started a media campaign online.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a grand jury. What was that?
That was over the allegations that Cindy made.
Okay.
It went to grand jury, and it was a no bill on my brother.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up because I don't think that I put that in my notes. Thank you for bringing that up. So the listeners to understand that Cindy made these charges against Jonathan, and they didn't go away or get dropped or anything just because he disappeared. The prosecution continued,
Correct.
even though Jonathan wasn't around. And please repeat that again. What did the grand jury decide?
It was a no bill against my brother.
Okay. And so that's to mean maybe not necessarily that he's innocent, but there's no proof of it, that it happened.
Correct. There's no evidence that my brother did any of these things that she's accused him of.
Okay. When did that grand jury convene? Was it last year or early this year? October?
October of 2018.
Okay. All right. Now, it's also my understanding that Cindy and Jonathan, even though he disappeared, they are not married anymore. They're divorced.
Correct.
So the divorce did end up going through.
Correct, but not with my brother being here and having anything to do with it. In October of 2018, she filed for divorce from my brother for abandonment and physical and emotional abuse.
Wow.
And in January of 2019 was granted a divorce on those grounds.
Okay. So she and Jonathan are not a couple anymore. They're divorced. Of course, she got custody of the kids, being that Jonathan is not around anymore. And so this proceedings happened right around the time that the grand jury occurred.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Told by the sheriff's department there are, nor will there be any charges against my brother. There was no evidence.
Okay. The investigator regarding this case, he was on it for a while, but did he get removed, or what is your understanding? Of course, we have to remember, this case is only a year old. Even I would be surprised if an investigator wasn't on it for at least a year, but it doesn't seem that happened in this case. What can you say about that?
The original investigator was removed upon family request.
When you say family, your family?
Correct.
Okay. Just in general, can you say why that was? Can you say? You don't have to say. Can you say?
We have no confidence in him and feel that he was not doing my brother due diligence.
How many investigators have been on your brother's disappearance now?
After him, then the captain at Lincoln County was the investigator, and I worked well with him, and then he just retired all of a sudden, and then now there's another investigator. So I'm on my third investigator with Lincoln County, and MBI, which is Mississippi Bureau of Investigations, has an officer assigned that works with Lincoln County.
Okay. But we have to remember one of those investigators got removed at your request. How did they react to that when you requested that he be removed? Was that something that you really had to fight for, or did they just kind of go along with it?
No, they didn't really fight against it. I believe that we had a good reasons for things to be done.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's maybe a good sign that they were willing to go along with that. Sometimes police departments aren't so accommodating. So, okay. John's house. We know that it got trashed. We know that things were stolen, and we're going to get to a little bit that still before we're done. But your parents showed up with a U-Haul and some time after that and cleaned it out?
Yeah, I mean, like we said, when it first happened, it was like just a whirlwind, and nobody really knew what was going on. All everybody knew was Cindy's story, and then John saying that he was going to turn himself in, but then nobody knew where he was, and his rent would have been due the 1st of July. So towards the end of June, my parents and my husband went down there to get John's stuff, pack it up and move it up and put it in storage because we had no clue what was going on, where John was. So it was the end of June that my husband and my parents went down and packed up John's house, got his utility trailer, my dad's bumper pool camper, and what was left in John's house.
And is there somebody else living in that house now, or is it abandoned? What's the state of it now?
No, now, see, last time we were down, when John lived there, that house was new. It had just been built. And where Brittany lived, it was a fairly new house, too. And now, on the other side, they've built another new house. John's house is in the middle, but somebody lives in it now.
Okay. Did anybody, when you went down there, your family, and I realize none of you are forensic experts, going through the house, see anything unusual? Like maybe there was a fight or something? I realize it was trash, so it might have been hard to tell, but any signs of violence that had happened in the house that kind of stuck out?
The only thing that stuck out was how trashed it was, because before this had happened, my parents and Bryce, like I told you, Bryce was at John's house, at my parents' house when John and Amy Grace were gone to Washington, D.C. So my parents and Bryce went down to my brother's house that week and took down like some dishes and, some pots and pans and stuff like that and put it in the house so that my brother would have, household stuff. And Bryce was so excited showing my parents, hey, this is going to be my room and this is my daddy's room. And, so the house was clean because Mama made sure, because then when John got home, the house would be all set up and everything for him and the kids. So they were just shocked at how trashed it was.
Since Jonathan disappeared June 2nd, 2018, has Cindy ever offered up, I know you probably haven't spoken to her, but through the grapevine, you've ever heard anything? Of course, we know we have this, the grand jury in which she had these charges against Jonathan. Of course, they went nowhere, and then divorce. Has she ever offered up any theory as to what could have happened to Jonathan?
She has told people that he's just hiding somewhere, that he's run off and hiding to get out of paying child support and stuff. But my brother was paying her child support back in April when they first split up. Every week he was making her write a receipt for child support before they were even divorced.
Right, and even before they were divorced, and this is not something that's come up yet, but we could talk about it right now. One of the things that I think really upset John is that he was putting money into the bank while he was out on the road, and she'd automatically take all of it out, correct?
Correct, until when she first told him that she wanted a divorce, that was like on a Sunday. That following Friday, when his check went in the bank, she must have been at the bank and withdrew his check. Then before he could get his check, because it was direct deposit through the company, before he could get it changed the next week, she had done it again. But then my brother had opened up a different account at a different bank, and she didn't know about it and had his checks going into there. But that was like right about the time all this happened.
Okay.
But yes, the first couple of weeks, she had drained the bank account.
She drained it. Okay. Okay.
My
After
brother had texted a friend that, so
you know that for sure.
there's a text message to that.
Okay. Great. Any idea? We know that they didn't get divorced till October, but did Cindy have a new man in her life by the time the divorce proceedings happened? Do you even know? Any ideas?
Yes, he had a new one the summer, like within. My brother was missing in June. By July, she says mid to end of July, she had a new boyfriend. Other people tell me that they were together. They know the 4th of July.
Okay. And we do have to remember that those pictures and things that Bryce found, that she was having relationships with other men, other couples, not just other men, but other couples, it seems, while Jonathan was out of town. So maybe that's not so unusual that she would find a new man so quickly. Have any of these other people that she was having these relationships, have anybody in your family been able to talk to any of them? Have the police ever talked to any of them about Jonathan's disappearance, to your knowledge?
We have not, and as far as the police go, I do not know. They've been given everything, but whether they have done anything, I do not know.
Okay. All right, and
They tell me this is an open investigation, so.
Of course it is. Absolutely. Okay. Now the children. We know that you had told us earlier, and we know that about Bryce, that he had done this for his dad, found those things, sent the pictures and things directly to him. But it seems since Jonathan's disappearance, you have not had anybody in your family has had any contact with him at all. Do you even know if he talks about his dad or anything? I know the conversation he had with Kevin, but um, anything that he's ever said about his dad's disappearance?
Not that, I mean, not, I don't know if he talks about it to anybody. I have no clue because, like I said, we haven't talked to Bryce since
Right.
my parents dropped them off the morning after the incident supposedly happened.
Okay. And what about Jonathan and Cindy's daughter, Amy? She would be maybe 16 now. Has has it ever gotten anything back to you about her father's disappearance? Has she ever said anything about it?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. However, Cindy is having some things are going on with Cindy in 2019, and it does kind of lead back to Jonathan's disappearance. Why is she? Maybe she's on trial right now, or is going to be going on trial. Why is that?
Um, Cindy, when my brother first come up missing, sold everything that they had. I mean, I don't know why, but for some reason she sold everything that they had, and she also sold a bobcat that was at their house, but it was not hers and it was not theirs. It was my father's bobcat. My father had bought it when he was helping John. Him and John were starting a business, and he had bought it then, but he was letting John use it for different things on different jobs. But my father was fixing to start building houses up here, and John was going to bring the bobcat up here and had got stuff to fix the hydraulics, was bringing it up here to start building the houses. And then all this happened, and in the meantime, Cindy was posting everything, including the bobcat, on Facebook for sale. So my father filed charges.
And so she's going to be going on trial for, I guess you could call it, the theft of the bobcat, selling something that wasn't hers.
Correct.
Okay. And where was the bobcat when it was sold? Was it at Cindy's house, or Cindy and John's house, or was it at the new place where Jonathan had moved to?
It was at Cindy and John's house.
Okay.
I mean, they hadn't split all their property up and stuff yet, you know?
Okay. And you had told me that she had just right out posted it online to sell, like Craigslist or Facebook, something like that.
Correct, on Facebook.
On Facebook. The problem is, has anybody been able to track the bobcat down?
Oh, no, but Lord, have we tried.
Okay. Any insight? Once again, how soon after Jonathan disappeared did she sell it? How quickly did she do that?
Within the month, within 6 weeks, I'm gonna say.
Wow. Okay. Any insight into why it's been difficult to track this down? Because, my opinion about the internet is nothing ever disappears on the internet. You can always find it. It's never completely deleted. And it would seem to me, especially someplace like Facebook, where they're always collecting information. I mean, they know everything it seems we're doing all the time, that you haven't been able to track the Bobcat down. Any ideas?
I mean, I feel somebody out there somewhere knows where that bobcat is, but for some reason they're not talking. That's not a big town. It's a
Mm-hmm.
small town. It didn't just get swallowed up, you know.
Right.
Why they're not talking, I don't know. It makes no sense to me.
Okay. I have to admit, maybe we should explain kind of what a bobcat is. It's kind of like a little bulldozer, something like that.
Yes.
A little tiny bulldozer, and I will probably have to post a picture so people know what that is. A lot of people aren't going to know. But do they come with titles like a car does? Do they have like a VIN that can be tracked? Do you know?
It does. It has a VIN number, and it was actually registered in my dad's name with the state because it was considered when my dad got it and bought
Mm-hmm.
it a piece of construction equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So it was registered with the state as a piece of construction equipment in my father's name.
And does he still have the title for it? The piece of paper?
Yes, he still has all the paperwork.
All right, so she sold it, and she sold it without a title. So she found somebody that would buy it without a title.
Correct.
So somebody that's pretty shady. Okay. Any idea how much money she got for it?
She had it listed on Facebook for 4,000.
And you had told me that probably the true value of it was quite a bit higher than that.
Oh yeah, because my dad had the buckets and the fork attachments to go with it.
Okay. So she must have wanted to sell it fairly quickly then. Okay. So, and when is that trial due to happen?
Um, it should be coming up soon.
Okay.
We don't have the exact date yet, but it should be coming up soon.
Okay. Do you even know how this was it your father who initiated this, saying that he stole it from her, or she stole it from him? Is that how this got initiated?
Uh, I know my father. Somebody had sent my dad a picture of it being posted on Facebook
Okay.
when she first posted it, and that's how my dad was made aware of it. And my dad called the original investigator and said something to him about it, and my dad actually had to file police reports and go down and talk to them several times before they actually filed charges against her. They kept saying, well, he
Mm.
forgot to sign this document or he forgot to sign this one. It was always something. And we live 5 hours away from where my brother lived. So
Mm-hmm.
it would take, 5 hours there, 5 hours back. That's a good day.
Sure. Sure.
And at that time, my dad was going through cancer treatment, so he couldn't
Oh
just
my.
miss treatments to
Oh
drive down
my.
there to do something that should have been taken care of the first time, not over and over and over.
Oh my. Wow. Okay. And so nobody made your family aware that the Bobcat was being sold. I guess what I'm saying is, did your father just take for granted that the Bobcat was still over at Cindy's and that she would never do
Yeah.
something like sell it?
Well, not that he wouldn't. He was just, we were still at that time. It was, like I said, 4 to 6 weeks after John come up
Mm.
missing, still trying to figure out what is going on.
Right.
Where is John and what's going on?
Right. Do you happen to know if she's going to trial? I guess she's pleading that not guilty on this. I don't know, if she's found guilty. Really don't even know what the penalty is. I'm sure there's some jail time, but it's not like, a life sentence or anything. Do you know what her defense even is. Is she saying that she didn't actually sell it? Is she saying that it was hers? Do you even know?
She's saying that she, from what we understand, she has told somebody that she wrote my dad a check for $200 for the Bobcat.
Uh-huh. Okay. That's and she sold it
Yeah,
for
that's what we said.
4,000. Yeah, like your dad would actually take that amount of money for it.
Right.
Okay. All right. Now there's another recent development that you had told me that happened this past weekend. Did she post something or something happened on Facebook or somewhere where she finally made a comment about John's case? Is that true? Was that last weekend? Like maybe like June 15th, something like that? Did that happen?
It did.
Yeah, what did she say?
Um, well, I don't have it pulled up to say
Okay.
word for word, but
Uh,
she's never said anything that I know of. Well, she's made one post a long time ago that people had sent me where she was victimizing herself again and running my brother in the ground. And then she made a post after we had made a post about questions, what kind of questions do you have that we can answer? And she came on there and said she could answer some questions and clear some things up since I wanted to be one-sided. But I've never been one-sided. I've just told things as I've been told they happen or as I have found them, in whatever order it may be.
yes.
My brother's not innocent. I've said that a million times. But I just want to know, where's my brother? That's all I want to know. And she has never looked for my brother. She's never asked for help finding my brother, never said, hey, he's missing, never acknowledged it. So she came on Facebook saying that John did these things to her and that the grand jury, that the police had told her that once John's found and the charges would be brought back up, and that there was a gun clip found in John's truck, and I mean all of this stuff that's not true. I even the next day called the police department and asked them about the clip of the truck, and the investigator told me he had heard what she had said, and he had watched the video again to make sure he didn't miss anything, but there was no clip found in John's truck. There was papers and a half bag of charcoal,
Okay.
and then the public started not really attacking her, but asking her, okay, if your husband's missing, why are you not leading up the search for him, if not for you to get child support, but for your children to know who your father is? Or for you to get justice for what you say he done to you, why are you not trying to find him? And she has nothing to say. She hasn't said anything.
And she's bringing this up right on the verge of her going to trial regarding this Bobcat stuff.
Correct.
Huh.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Um, this has been a year. It's a little over a year. We're doing this June 22nd, 2019. So it's been a year and 20 days. What has this been like for you? Of course, your other siblings, and for your parents. Trying to process all of this over the last year.
Yeah. It's been hell. You don't know. You wonder. For my parents, it's been hell. My dad don't sleep. My dad's, like I said, he's went through cancer treatments. He has some major surgeries coming up that, he really has to think about. Mama, it's hard for her. Like she says, the last time she seen her son, watched him back out of the driveway and waved at him and told him, talk to you later, never knowing, that's the last time she would see him. She would have hugged him a little longer or kept him a little longer. You know, you never think that's the last time you see your child. My brother, I miss him, you know, his
Yeah.
little goofy self, his laugh. I'm sure his kid's missing.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know where he's at. You wonder what happened. Somebody knows something. I mean, he didn't
Mm.
just vanish off the earth. Somebody knows what happened to my brother. If he's alive, we're happy. Just tell us you're okay. You know, we just want to know where he's at.
Is there any chance in your mind, given what you know about particularly that May 31st day of what may or may not have happened, that Jonathan might have thought, you know what, even though, granted, eventually we know that the grand jury said, no charges to be brought, but maybe Jonathan was a little afraid. Is there any chance that he could have run off thinking that he would be charged with those crimes and maybe have to go to jail for them? Any chance that he did run off that day, saying he was going to go out, but to talk to the cops and maybe he had something else in mind? In your mind, is that possible?
In the beginning, I thought, you know, maybe John's went somewhere to clear his head for a little bit and then figure out what the hell's going on, and then, you know, he'll be back and deal with this. But then after, you know, several weeks had passed and nobody had heard a word from John, nothing. Like his phone wasn't active. There was absolutely no trace of him. Then my thoughts had changed. Like, you know, something's not right. There's something wrong. You know, but at first, yeah, I mean, anybody would think, you know, he was scared what's going on, but something's not right. He would never go this long and not talk to my parents nor his children. His children were his life.
Have any searches ever been done around where his house is?
Um, to my knowledge, there's been two around the direct area where the trailer is, but not the full property, because according to her and her father, they don't own all that property. Some of it belongs to her uncles and other family members, and they would have to all sign for permission.
Well, I guess what I'm asking, around where Jonathan, his new place, where he was talking to Kevin, any searches done around there?
None.
None. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's probably something that probably needs to be done at this point. Probably just a suggestion. I could see doing searches around where the truck was, makes sense, but being that he told Kevin, and of course the pings show that he was around his house on that road when the last ping was, it would make sense, I think, at some point to maybe start looking around that area. I think that makes a lot of factual, logical sense. Okay. Do you have a website or a Facebook page, anything set up for Jonathan at this time?
We do have a Facebook page, a Find Jonathan Estes Facebook page.
Okay. And do you run it, or does somebody else run it?
Me and one of John's friends from high school run it.
Okay, great. Great. Okay. Any last words before we complete this interview, Melissa?
We just ask if you know something, say something. We just want to find John. That's it. We just want to know where he's at. Bring my brother home.
Okay, great. And listeners will know that once this interview is completed, I'm going to be talking to all of you about my conversation with Kevin, who is Jonathan's longtime friend and the last person to talk to Jonathan on the phone. I had a good conversation with Kevin earlier this week. I'm going to say around June 18th or 19th, something like that. Well, Melissa, I deeply appreciate being on this episode. You are now, started to say, now part of the Unfound family, which means until Jonathan's case is solved, you will always have me just a phone call or email away to talk, to throw around some ideas. Of course, I hope that Jonathan's disappearance is solved even before this episode airs next Friday. But if it isn't, I want you to know that myself and my assistants, we're always going to be here to help, in our own way and what we can do for you. I want you to know that.
We thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that was my interview with Melissa Estes, sister of Jonathan Estes. I thank her for joining me and all of you on this episode. I need to correct something I think I said during the interview. Jonathan's son Bryce did not find the video that is currently posted on the Unfound YouTube channel. That video wasn't taken until May 10th of 2018. Whereas Bryce had sent the X-rated pics and texts from his mother's phone to his father, Jonathan, in March 2018, approximately 2 months before that. The video was found by Melissa in Jonathan's Google account, and that video was amongst the pics and texts Bryce had sent Jonathan before. I apologize for the confusion. As I mentioned during the interview, I got to speak to Kevin, Jonathan's best friend. He is the guy who Jonathan talked to on June 2nd, 2018, when Jonathan said he was going outside to see what's up with the cops going up and down his road. Here are the main points from my discussion with Kevin. He says there was a roadblock set up on his road as well on the day Jonathan disappeared, June 2nd, 2018. The reason Kevin knows this is because a repairman had come over to his house that day, and the guy said he was stopped by the cops. The officer said they were looking for a truck similar to the one the repairman was driving, and this guy was driving a truck similar to Jonathan's. So, there was a roadblock on Kevin's and Jonathan's road that day, and they did not live on the same street. Kevin theorizes that the roadblock was set up to find Jonathan because the officers probably knew that Kevin and Jonathan were friends and might have thought that Jonathan might be headed over to Kevin's that day. Kevin says although Jonathan believed his wife was cheating, her divorce request was a surprise to Jonathan. Kevin was interviewed twice by the police about Jonathan's disappearance. Neither was a very worthwhile experience. Those are my words. In fact, in the second one, the officer insisted that Kevin was lying. This is the same department whose vehicles were riding up and down Jonathan's road on June 1st and 2nd. Kevin did not know about the deer cam until Jonathan took it down. However, as I mentioned in the interview, Kevin believed Jonathan was trying to catch one guy, and Melissa believed Jonathan was trying to catch a different guy. Kevin insists Jonathan never had any problems with the police, and he assured Jonathan intended to talk to police that day. As for the truck, Jonathan had told Kevin where he parked it, and since Kevin knew where it was, behind Cindy and Jonathan's house, Kevin inferred that Cindy also knew where it was. However, when the truck was discovered 2 weeks later, Cindy tried to portray it that Kevin had been withholding the truck's location from the police, whereas Kevin says he did no such thing. He just took for granted that Cindy and her family knew where it was, since Jonathan had told him it was on their property. Kevin says the reason Jonathan was over at his old house, Cindy's, on May 10th, 2018, is because Jonathan heard that Cindy was burning and junking his stuff. It's also the reason Jonathan called the police to show up there, so Jonathan could remove his things without incident. Kevin says that Jonathan's intention on May 31st, 2018 was to get Cindy to sign papers regarding their divorce. That's why he was over there. Jonathan then told Kevin afterwards that as soon as Jonathan got there, Cindy lost her mind and tried to run him over. Jonathan never said anything about raping Cindy. Kevin talked to Bryce not long after the disappearance. Bryce told him that Cindy said Jonathan is never coming back. That is the last conversation Kevin had with Bryce. And those are the main points from my discussion with Kevin. He, of course, has his own theories regarding what happened to Jonathan, but I'm just going to leave those between me and him. There's a lot of information in this case, and a ton of theorizing that can be done. Cindy, her father, the police, maybe one of these lovers Cindy had. They all had, or could have had reasons to cause Jonathan's disappearance. However, you know we don't do much theorizing here. So I'm just going to point out a few issues that confuse me. Why would Jonathan leave his truck back behind his house if the GPS could be disabled by simply pulling a fuse? Why not just pull the fuse and drive it back to his new place? My best guess is because the truck was actually in Cindy's name, as Melissa stated. Or Jonathan didn't want the truck out in front of his place because it would show that he was home, and he didn't want anyone to know that, especially the police. Really? I'm just not sure. Either way, I have to tell you, I really do believe Jonathan parked the truck where it was eventually found. My next confusing issue: why was it that Cindy was the first one to bring up the divorce when it was Jonathan who found out about her infidelity a full month before that and kept it quiet? Keep in mind, at that point in April, when Cindy first brought up divorce, she didn't know about Bryce sending Jonathan the X-rated pics and texts. My best guess? Cindy had found out what Bryce did and kind of wanted to do a preemptive strike on Jonathan before he could get all his ducks in a row to spring a divorce on her. Meaning, when you watch the video that is on Unfound's YouTube channel, that is not when Cindy first found out about Jonathan having her pics and texts. The next confusing issue: the neighbor. Is anybody else bothered that Jonathan had only been living at his new place for a month, but already had his next door neighbor's cell phone number? Did the neighbor and Jonathan know each other before they lived next to each other? Because I don't think I've ever had any of my next door neighbor's phone numbers. How do I know he had her phone number? Because he called her to pick him up after he ditched his truck. It also seems strange to me that she watches his house the whole day on June 1st, sees the cops going up and down the road, in fact one of them stopping to talk to her, but sees nothing on June 2nd. Most importantly, Jonathan leaving his place. Was she not home that day? I'd like more information regarding this. Lastly, I really believe a search around Jonathan's new place needs to be conducted. Yes, we can all believe that he met with foul play. However, we also need to look at this from a different point of view. Here is a guy who was going through a divorce. His wife had been cheating with various men. He was being accused of raping Cindy. The only vehicle he had was in his wife's name. He was quitting his job, and the police were looking for him. I have to tell you, people have committed suicide over far less. So the area around Jonathan's place must be searched as soon as possible. What I think I'm saying is, despite a very plausible general theory of what could have happened to Jonathan Estes, there's still a lot of hacking for facts that needs to be done, because the picture of this disappearance is still very unclear. I'll leave the rest of the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.